At Mach 10, the margin between detection and impact is not a defensive window. It is a physics problem with a fixed answer. The destroyer is operating in the Western Pacific, 380 nautical miles east of the Taiwan Strait, in open ocean, 90 nautical miles ahead of a carrier strike group. It is screening as the forward air defense picket. The picket position is the most exposed position in the strike group's defensive architecture. It exists to detect and engage threats before they reach the carrier, to absorb the first salvo, to buy the carrier 90 additional nautical miles of warning time. The crew of the picket ship understands this arrangement. They volunteered for it. At 3:17 a.m., two separate events occurred in rapid sequence that the fire control system registered as a single integrated threat picture within 0.6 seconds. The first, the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting 180 nautical miles to the southeast, relaying data through the Link 16 network, reported a ballistic launch signature from a position in Fujian province assessed as a DF-17 medium-range ballistic missile pad. The signature was distinct from a conventional ballistic trajectory. The boost phase was steeper, shorter, and the post-boost separation signature consistent with a hypersonic glide vehicle rather than a re-entry vehicle. The DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle detached from the booster at high altitude and entered its glide phase. At Mach 10, it was covering approximately 3,400 meters per second. The second, 12 contacts, airborne, bearing 285, range 310 kilometers. Subsonic, altitude 80 meters, speed Mach 0.85. YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles in their subsonic cruise phase launched from a planned surface group that had been positioned at the edge of detection range for 6 hours. 12 missiles at Mach 0.85, followed by a Mach 3 terminal sprint inside 40 kilometers. Warhead, 165 kilograms. One hit was a mission neutralizing event against any surface combatant. The DF-17 was at high altitude, decelerating from its maximum velocity as the glide phase traded speed for range, but still tracking at an assessed Mach 8 to Mach 10 across the current engagement geometry. The fire control computer computed the DF-17's intercept solution in real time and updated it every 0.4 seconds as the glide vehicle maneuvered. At this moment, time to terminal phase for the DF-17, 6 minutes, 44 seconds. Time to terminal phase for the YJ-18 salvo, 18 minutes for the subsonic cruise phase, then the Mach 3 sprint. 2 threats, 2 timelines, 1 weapons inventory. The SM-6 was the only weapon in the ship's inventory with assessed intercept capability against both threat types. Against the YJ-18 in terminal sprint, at Mach 3, SM-6 in active radar homing mode, engagement window approximately 8 to 12 seconds, intercept probability assessed at 72%. Against the DF-17 in terminal phase at Mach 8 to Mach 10, SM-6 in BMD mode, engagement window assessed at 4 to 6 seconds, intercept probability assessed at 44% per round in single engagement mode. The 44% figure was the published unclassified estimate for SM-6 against a hypersonic glide vehicle with terminal maneuvering. The DF-17 could alter its glide path within a 40-kilometer footprint in the final 30 seconds. At Mach 10, a 5-degree correction moved the impact point 14 kilometers. The SM-6 seeker had to solve that in real time. 1 SM-6 in single engagement mode, 44% probability, 2 sequential, 69%, 3, 80%, 4, 87%. Doctrine recommended a minimum of 4 SM-6 in fire assess fire mode for 85% or greater intercept confidence. 4 SM-6 for the DF-17. 8 SM-6 remaining for 12 YJ-18S. Against 12 YJ-18S at Mach, 3-terminal sprint with 8 SM-6 at 72% hit probability, 8 rounds, 5.76 expected intercepts, 6 contacts neutralized, 6 surviving into the SM-2 and ESSM layers, manageable with the 24 SM-2 and 32 ESSM cells. The math appeared to close. 4 SM-6 reserved for the hypersonic, 8 for the cruise missiles, middle and inner rings handling the surviving YJ-18S. The Fire Control System's engagement recommendation matched this allocation. The TAO read the recommendation and did not authorize it, because the math only appeared to close if 2 assumptions held simultaneously, and both assumptions had been studied and neither was reliable. The first assumption, the DF-17 arrived alone as a single platform, and 4 SM-6 were sufficient. The second assumption, the 12 YJ-18 was the complete cruise missile salvo, not the leading element of a second wave. The DF-17 was a first-strike weapon used to suppress an adversary's ability to respond before subsequent forces arrived. The doctrinal employment of a DF-17 against a U.S. carrier, picket ship, was not to neutralize the ship as an endpoint. It was to degrade the ship's defensive capacity in the window before additional forces entered engagement range. If the DF-17 consumed 4 SM-6 and the 12 YJ-18S consumed 8 more, the ship had 0 SM-6 remaining when whatever came after them arrived. And in the current picture, 6 planned destroyers and 2 planned cruisers were positioned 280 to 340 kilometers to the northwest. Each Type 05 2D destroyer carried 64 VLS cells with a significant YJ-18 loadout. The E-2D was reporting active fire control radar emissions from 4 of the 6 Type 05 2D hulls. Not standby mode, active targeting illumination. They were in pre-launch configuration. They had not launched yet. They might not launch. But if the 12 YJ-18 currently inbound were Wave 1, and the planned surface group launched Wave 2 while the ship was managing the DF-17 intercept on 4 SM-6, the defensive arithmetic for Wave 2 would be 0 SM-6, 24 SM-2 against a second salvo of whatever size the plan chose to send. Against a second YJ-18 salvo of 12 at Mach 3 terminal sprint, with SM-2 only at degraded probability, the math did not close. The TAO had 4 minutes and 11 seconds before the DF-17 entered terminal phase. He used 9 of them. Assess probability plan surface group launches a second salvo. Intelligence watch officer. Unable to confirm negative. 4 hulls active fire control radar. Consistent with pre-launch targeting. Probability moderate to high. Moderate to high. Not certain. If no second salvo, 4 SM-6 on the DF-17 was optimal. If a second salvo came, preserving SM-6 beyond the minimum, DF-17 allocation was the difference between a manageable defense and a failing one. 6 SM-6 BMD on the DF-17. Fire assess fire sequence, 2 rounds initial, reassess, 2 rounds follow-up if needed. 6 SM-6 AAW reserved for the YJ-18 terminal sprint. SM-2 takes the YJ-18 subsonic cruise phase. ESSM on standby. RAM on standby. I want the planned surface group radar picture updated every 30 seconds. Running count 3:20 a.m., second 183, DF-17, 4 minutes to terminal phase. YJ-18 Wave 1, 12 contacts at 272 kilometers, 13 minutes to SM-6 AAW range. SM-6, 6 BMD allocated, 6 AAW reserved. SM-2, 24, ESSM 32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%. Plan Group 4 hulls active radar. Cost $0. SPY-6. BMD transition in progress. He had accepted a lower intercept probability on the DF-17 to preserve 6 SM-6 for a second YJ-18 wave that might not come. If the DF-17 penetrated on a 4-round fire-assessed fire with 6 cells allocated, it was because the 6th cell had not been needed. The probability math on 6 SM-6 against the DF-17 was 92%. Acceptable. The cost of that 92% against a possible second wave, 2 fewer SM-6 for the cruise missile fight. Everything downstream of this decision would be determined by whether the planned surface group fired. Running count. 3:19 a.m., second 126. DF-17, Mach 8 to 10, 4 minutes 11 seconds to terminal phase. YJ-18, Wave 1, 12 contacts at 295 kilometers, Mach 0.85, 14 minutes to SM-6 AAW range. SM-6, 6 allocated BMD, 6 reserved AAW. SM-2, 24. ESSM, 32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100% both mounts. Planned surface group, 4 hulls, active fire control radar. Cost, $0. Radar, transitioning BMD geometry. The SPY-6 in BMD mode required a specific high-elevation tracking geometry for the DF-17 intercept. The transition from standard AAW surveillance mode to BMD intercept geometry took 80 seconds and degraded track quality on the YJ-18 contacts during the transition, not enough to prevent engagement, but enough to increase the mid-course basket uncertainty on any SM-2 fired during the transition window. The TAO held all SM-2 fire until the SPY-6 BMD transition was complete. The DF-17 entered its terminal glide phase at 3:21 a.m. The transition from boost-supported glide to unpowered terminal descent compressed its maneuver envelope. The vehicle could no longer adjust its footprint across 40 kilometers. It was locked into a terminal approach geometry that would impact within a 12-kilometer footprint centered on the ship's current position. The fire control computer locked a terminal intercept solution at 3:22 a.m. SM-6 cells 1 and 2 launched at 3:22 a.m. in the initial fire pair. The SPY-6 held the DF-17 track at full quality. The BMD geometry transition had completed, the radar illuminating the hypersonic contact at maximum precision. The 2 SM-6 rounds in BMD mode traveled at 3.5 Gs toward an intercept geometry that was, at this moment, the most extreme engagement the ship's systems had ever been asked to solve. Not the most numerous, not the most expensive, the most extreme in pure kinematics, an interceptor closing at Mach 3.5 against the target at Mach 9. The combined closure rate producing an engagement geometry that lasted under 5 seconds from first terminal seeker acquisition to detonation. First SM-6, proximity detonation at 38 kilometers altitude, 62 kilometers slant range from the ship. The fragmentation pattern from the SM-6 warhead at this altitude and closure rate produced an assessed intercept probability of 44% against the DF-17's hardened re-entry structure. The fire control computer assessed the result in 3.1 seconds. Debris signature was ambiguous. Fragmentation pattern consistent with a proximity detonation, but the DF-17's glide vehicle structure appeared to have maintained gross integrity. The contact continued. SM-6, 3, and 4. Fire. The fire-assessed fire sequence fired 2 more SM-6 at the continuing DF-17 contact at 3:22 a.m., 9 seconds after the first pair. The DF-17 was now at 28 kilometers altitude and decelerating through Mach 7, second pair intercept geometry. Both rounds detonated within 4 meters of the contact in a 1.8-second window. At Mach 7 and 28 kilometers altitude, a warhead fragmentation pattern from 2 simultaneous SM-6 detonations at 4-meter proximity was assessed as structurally decisive. Track file. Loss of coherent return. Debris field. No further DF-17 track. The DF-17 was assessed as neutralized. 4 SM-6 expended on the DF-17, 2 remaining in the BMD allocation. The fire control system immediately requeued all 6 SM-6 BMD cells back to AAW mode. The BMD engagement was complete, and the 2 unused cells plus the 6 reserved AAW cells were now available as a combined 8-cell AAW inventory against the YJ-18 salvo. Except the YJ-18 salvo had closed during the 62-second DF-17 intercept window. The 12 YJ-18 contacts were now at 211 kilometers, 8 minutes from SM-6 AAW engagement range, and the planned surface group fire control radars were still active. Running count: 3:23 a.m., second 381, DF-17 neutralized, 4 SM-6 expended, SM-6 remaining 8, YJ-18, wave 1, 12 contacts at 206 kilometers, Mach 0.85, 7 minutes 40 seconds to SM-6 AAW range. Planned surface group, 4 hulls, active targeting radar, no additional launches detected yet. SM-2 24, ESSM 32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%, cost $8.4 million. Radar returning to full AAW mode. The SM-2 engagement of the YJ-18 subsonic cruise phase began at 3:24 a.m. as the SPY-6 returned to full AAW surveillance geometry. At 190 kilometers, 12 YJ-18 contacts at 80-meter altitude in subsonic cruise were detectable, but outside SM-2 optimal engagement range. The SM-2 outer boundary was 160 kilometers. The TAO held fire, watching the contacts close through 170, 160, 150 kilometers. At 148 kilometers, the planned surface group made its decision. 4 additional contacts, bearing 284, range 298 kilometers, profile YJ-18, subsonic cruise phase, 4 contacts, launched approximately 30 seconds ago. Wave 2, 4 YJ-18S, not 12. A smaller second wave, possibly a follow-on salvo from the 2 Type 052D hulls whose fire control radars had been most active. The total picture: 12 YJ-18, wave 1 at 148 kilometers, 4 YJ-18, wave 2 at 298 kilometers, 7 minutes behind the first wave, 16 total cruise missiles, 8 SM-6 for the terminal sprint phase of both waves, 24 SM-2 for the subsonic phases. The math had shifted from catastrophic to marginal. 16 targets, 8 SM-6 for terminal sprint allocation. The Wave 1 terminal sprint would arrive 7 minutes before Wave 2. If all 8 SM-6 were used on Wave 1's terminal sprint, Wave 2 would face SM-2 and ESSM only at terminal sprint. Against a Mach 3 YJ-18 in terminal sprint, SM-2 hit probability was 54%. Against 4 contacts with 4 SM-2 expected intercepts, 2.2, 2 contacts surviving to ESSM range. Against the ESSM at terminal sprint geometry, 52% per round. 2 contacts required 4 ESSM for 80% coverage. Manageable, but thin. Or split the SM-6. 6 on Wave 1 terminal sprint, 2 reserved for Wave 2. Against 6 SM-6 on 12 Wave 1 contacts, the The engagement geometry meant the TAO could engage the 6 highest threat contacts in terminal sprint and leave 6 for SM-2, against 2 SM-6 and 4 contacts in Wave 2 terminal sprint. The math was marginal, but functional. SM-2 on Wave 1 subsonic phase. 12 rounds spread across bearing clusters. SM-6 for terminal sprint. All 8 on Wave 1 if Wave 2 maintains subsonic at terminal phase entry. If Wave 2 initiates sprint before Wave 1 is cleared, redirect 2 SM-6. SM-2 cells 1 through 12 against Wave 1 at 42 to 50 kilometers, subsonic phase. 12 launches in 5.4 seconds, 8 intercepts. 4 misses, 3 contacts executing minor course corrections in the SM-2 terminal phase that shifted them outside the semi-active radar illuminator's optimal tracking cone. 1 contact lost briefly to sea clutter at 80 meters altitude before reacquisition, too late for the SM-2 already in flight. Wave 1, 8 contacts neutralized, 4 surviving into terminal sprint. Running count, 3:30 a.m., second 795, DF-17 neutralized. Wave 1, 8 contacts neutralized by SM-2, 4 surviving into sprint. Wave 2, 4 contacts at 198 kilometers, Mach 0.85. SM-6, 8 AAW available. SM-2, 12 remaining. ESSM-32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%. Cost $22.8 million. Time, 13 minutes. Wave 1 entered terminal sprint at 3:31 a.m. 4 surviving YJ-18 contacts accelerating through Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3. Range at sprint initiation, 41 kilometers. At Mach 3, time to SM-6 engagement, approximately 35 seconds. Running count, 3:31 a.m., second 858. Wave 1 sprint, 4 contacts, Mach 3, 41 kilometers. Wave 2, 4 contacts, 198 kilometers, subsonic. SM-6, 8. SM-2, 12 remaining. ESSM-32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $22.8 million. Time elapsed, 14 minutes. 8 SM-6 against 4. Wave 1 contacts in terminal sprint. 2 rounds per contact. At 72% hit probability per round, 2-round engagement produced 92% confidence per contact pair. SM-6 cells, 5, 6, 7, 8 against the 4 Wave 1 contacts. The fire control system sequenced the engagement in pairs, 1.1 second interval, between the first pair and the second pair, each pair assigned to 2 contacts at the tightest available terminal engagement geometry. Contact 1 and 2. SM-6 cells 5 and 6 in simultaneous release. Both contacts Mach 3 at 28 kilometers. SM-6 5. Proximity detonation within 2 meters of contact 1. Structural disintegration. SM-6 6. The seeker acquired contact 2 at maximum terminal range, detonated within 5 meters. Contact 2. Debris field. 2 contacts neutralized. Contact 3 and 4. SM-6 cells, 7 and 8, 1.1 second delayed release. Contact 3 at 21 kilometers. Mach 3. SM-6 7. Proximity detonation. Contact neutralized. Contact 4. Executing terminal evasion maneuver at Mach 3. A 4-degree course correction inside 18 kilometers that shifted the impact footprint by 9 kilometers. The SM-6-8 seeker resolved the course correction in 0.8 seconds, detonated within 7 meters. Contact 4. Structural disintegration confirmed. Wave 1. 12 contacts launched, 12 neutralized. 4 by SM-2 in subsonic phase, 8 by SM-2 misses absorbed into SM-6 terminal engagement. SM-6 cells 1 through 8 expended, 4 on the DF-17, 4 on Wave 1YJ-18, terminal sprint. SM-6 inventory, 0. Wave 2 was still at 198 kilometers. Subsonic, 9 minutes from the terminal sprint. 0 SM-6. Running count, 3:33 a.m., second 965. Wave 1, 12 neutralized. SM-6, 0. Wave 2, 4 contacts, 198 kilometers. Mach 0.85, 9 minutes to sprint. SM-2, 12 remaining. ESSM, 32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $33.0 million. Planned surface group radar, 2 hulls, still active. Time, 16 minutes. 12 SM-2 remaining against 4 Wave 2 contacts. 3 per contact for high confidence coverage, exactly 12. If all 4 were neutralized in the subsonic phase, the engagement was over. If any survived to terminal sprint with no SM-6 remaining, ESSM at 52% probability against Mach 3, engagement window under 8 seconds per contact. SM-2 cells 13 through 16 against Wave 2 at 58 kilometers. 4 contacts, 1 SM-2 each. 3 intercepts, 1 miss. Contact 3, the trailing contact, had descended to 55 meters altitude. In the SM-2 approach, the lowest of the 4, its return partially merged with sea surface clutter. SM-2 detonated 18 meters above the contact's actual position. 3 contacts neutralized, 1 surviving at 51 kilometers. Mach 0.85. SM-2 cells, 17 through 20. 4 more SM-2 against the surviving contact, plus re-engagement insurance on the bearing cluster. The surviving Wave 2 contact at 46 kilometers. 2 SM-2 against it. First round proximity detonation, 3 meters. The contact's guidance system failed. The airframe continued on inertial trajectory at reduced altitude. Propulsion stopped, gliding on momentum at 38 kilometers. Still intact. Still carrying a 165-kilogram warhead. Still closing. Third SM-2 against the inertially coasting contact at 34 kilometers. Hit on the warhead section. Detonation. Not a proximity fuse, a direct structural impact that initiated the warhead in flight. The detonation at 34 kilometers produced an overpressure and debris field visible as a brief bright event on the FLIR display, followed by a debris cloud that the radar tracked for 90 seconds before losing coherence. Wave 2 contact neutralized at 34 kilometers. SM-2 inventory, 8 rounds remaining. The planned surface group fire control radars went to standby at 3:44 a.m. No further launch signatures detected. No Wave 3. At 3:44 a.m., the SPY-6 confirmed no inbound contacts within 80 kilometers. The E-2D relayed confirmation that the planned surface group had turned east, away from the engagement axis. The engagement was over. Running count. 3:44 a.m., second 1,624, all contacts neutralized. DF-17, neutralized at 38 kilometers altitude. Wave 1 YJ-18, 12 neutralized. Wave 2 YJ-18, 4 neutralized. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 8 remaining. ESSM, 32 unused. RAM, 21 unused. CIWS, 100% both mounts. 1 Wave 2 contact detonated at 34 kilometers by SM-2 direct impact. No hull impacts. Cost, $39.6 million. Time elapsed, 27 minutes. Running count, 3:44 a.m., second 1,627, all 17 contacts neutralized. DF-17, 4 SM-6. Wave 1, 8 SM-2 plus 4 SM-6. Wave 2, 4 SM-2. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 8 remaining. ESSM, 32 unused. RAM, 21 unused. CIWS, 100% unused. 0 hull impacts. Cost, $36 million. Time elapsed, 27 minutes. The damage assessment completed at 4:30 a.m. No hull impacts. No structural damage. No personnel injuries. The ship was fully operational. The DF-17 debris field had scattered across a 40-kilometer radius at high altitude. Fragments had entered the atmosphere on degraded ballistic trajectories across a wide footprint. None of the assessed fragment paths intersected the ship's position at surface level. The magazine assessment read at 4:33 a.m. produced the number the watch team already knew from continuous monitoring. SM-6, 0 of 8. SM-2, 8 of 24 remaining. ESSM, 32, fully intact. RAM, 21, fully intact. CIWS, both mounts fully loaded. The outer ring was completely expended. 8 SM-2 remained. Enough for a partial middle ring engagement against a follow-on threat. The inner rings were untouched because no threat had penetrated to inner ring range. The engagement had been resolved entirely in the outer ring at ranges of 21 to 62 kilometers by the most expensive interceptors in the inventory. The weapons officer reviewed the sequence once. The DF-17 had consumed 62 seconds of fire control attention at the highest engagement intensity the ship had ever operated. During those 62 seconds, the YJ-18 Wave 1 closed from 295 to 211 kilometers, while the SPY-6 managed a BMD track and 12 cruise missile tracks simultaneously. 3 of the 4 SM-2 misses on Wave 1 occurred during the post-BMD radar transition window, contacts that would have been intercepted in the subsonic phase if the DF-17 had not been in the picture. 4 SM-6 direct, 3 SM-6 indirect through transition degradation, 7 SM-6 attributable to the DF-17's presence. The supply officer assembled the final accounting at 6 a.m. 1 DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle, unit cost estimated from open source analysis at $3 million to $8 million per platform. Call it $5 million. 16 YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles at $500,000 to $2 million per unit. Conservative estimate $800,000 average, $12.8 million. Total adversary investment in the engagement, approximately $17.8 million. U.S. munitions expended, 8 SM-6 at $2.1 million to $16.8 million. 16 SM-2 at a $1.2 million to $19.2 million. Total, $36 million. Exchange ratio, 2-to-1 in the adversary's favor on direct munitions cost. The second lowest ratio in this analysis after the USV engagement. But the ratio was not the strategic metric. The strategic metric was this. The plan had deployed 1 DF-17 and 16 YJ-18S and had forced the complete expiration of the ship's SM-6 inventory and 2/3 of its SM-2 inventory. The outer ring was gone. The ship was now a middle ring asset in a forward picket position that existed to defend against exactly the kind of threat that had just emptied it. The DF-17 alone had not been sufficient to penetrate the defense. 4 SM-6 had neutralized it with enough probability to prevent hull impact. But the DF-17 had not needed to penetrate. It had needed to be in the engagement picture. Its presence had forced the SM-6 allocation decision, generated the radar geometry transition, degraded the SM-2 engagement quality, and consumed 4 irreplaceable interceptors that would otherwise have been available for whatever came next. The DF-17 had cost the adversary $5 million and had cost the defense $14.7 million in direct SM-6 expenditure, plus the 3 indirect SM-6 consumed by transition degradation effects. $14.7 million in SM-6 to intercept a $5 million platform. And in doing so, it had also transformed a ship with a full outer ring into a ship with no outer ring. A change in defensive capacity that was not measurable in dollars because the operational consequence of that change would only be determined by what the plan sent next. Emergency resupply transmitted at 5:14 a.m. SM-6 priority. SM to secondary. ETA from the pre-position logistics vessel. 4 days. 4 days. 0 SM-6. A planned surface group that had turned east but had not returned to port. Turning east was not the same as standing down. It was the same direction a surface group would turn to reload and re-engage. The assessed reload time for planned type 052 DVLS cells from logistics support vessels, 18 to 36 hours. The ship had 4 days. The adversary had 36 hours. Engagement summary. Western Pacific Picket Station, 3:17 a.m. to 3:44 a.m. local. DF-17 Hypersonic Glide Vehicle. 1 contact engaged by 4 SM-6 BMD, neutralized at 38 kilometers altitude. YJ-18, Wave 1, 12 contacts, 8 neutralized SM-2 subsonic, 4 neutralized SM-6 terminal sprint. YJ-18, Wave 2, 4 contacts, 3 neutralized SM-2 subsonic, 1 neutralized SM-2 direct impact at 34 kilometers. Total contacts, 17, all 17 neutralized. 0 hull impacts. Interceptors expended. SM 6 times 8, 0 remaining. SM 2 times 16, 8 remaining. ESSM, unused. RAM, unused. CIWS, unused. Adversary cost, approximately $17.8 million. U.S. munitions expenditure, $36 million. Exchange ratio, 2 to 1 in the adversary's favor. SM-6 indirect attribution to DF-17 presence in engagement. 7 of 8 SM-6 consumed directly or through transition degradation effects. 1 DF-17 at $5 million generated $14.7 million in SM-6 expenditure, plus removal of the outer ring from a forward picket ship. Magazine status, SM-60. SM-2 at 33%. Outer ring fully expended. Emergency resupply ETA 4 days. Planned service group reload estimate 18 to 36 hours. The DF-17 had not needed to reach the hull. It had needed to be in the problem. For $5 million, it had made itself the most expensive item in the engagement in every metric except the one the adversary was tracking. Whether the outer ring survived to fight again, it had not.